What happens when two of the most famous sisters in the world, Kourtney Kardashian and Kim Kardashian, decide to put their conflicts into a jar? Could something as simple as a negativity jar hold the power to restore peace in one of the most scrutinized families on the planet? In a household where every disagreement is magnified under the public eye, and where drama often becomes a headline, the experiment feels almost unthinkable. But this is the Kardashians, where the personal becomes public, and where even the smallest shift in their lives can spark a cultural conversation. On this particular day, the cameras were rolling, not just to capture glamour or business deals, but something far more raw. The idea of a negativity jar had been brought to the table as an almost childlike attempt to rein in the storm. Every time one of them expressed something critical, harsh, or rooted in old resentment, a price would be paid. A folded note, a confession of negativity, would go into the jar. For Kourtney Kardashian, the jar represented boundaries, a way to reclaim peace in a family dynamic that often left her feeling unheard. For Kim Kardashian, it was more of a challenge, an attempt to test her ability to keep the peace in the face of long-standing rivalry. The concept was disarmingly simple. No screaming matches. No endless debates that went in circles, just a written acknowledgement that negativity had surfaced. The jar became both a punishment and a mirror, reflecting back to them how often those moments actually occurred. In the quiet pauses, when the slips of paper sat stacked inside, the jar itself seemed to glow with tension, like a symbol of all the unspoken words that usually exploded in arguments. The idea emerged after months of escalating tension between Kourtney and Kim. It wasn't just about their businesses or their appearances, it was about old wounds, the kind that resurfaced in the smallest disagreements, turning whispers into firestorms. The negativity jar was supposed to interrupt that cycle, to create a moment of reflection before fury overtook reason. And, as dramatic as it sounds, those early attempts revealed just how difficult peace can be, even in families that appear to have everything. The first incident happened over something trivial. Kourtney Kardashian sighed loudly at the way Kim had reorganized a table setting, a sigh sharp and deliberate. Kim immediately caught it. "That counts," she said, crossing her arms. Kourtney rolled her eyes, but in this experiment, the rules were the rules. She picked up a pen, wrote a few words on a folded slip, and dropped it into the negativity jar. The sound of the paper hitting the glass seemed louder than it should have been, echoing in the silence between them. From the outside, it may have looked ridiculous to grown women. Mothers, entrepreneurs, global icons, dropping notes into a jar like schoolchildren, but for them, this was no game. Every slip carried weight. Every drop into the jar was a reminder that their relationship had reached a point where drastic measures were necessary to preserve peace. Kardashian often described her struggles with feeling overwhelmed by constant criticism, sometimes from Kim herself. The negativity jar, in her mind, was a safeguard against that relentless pressure. Kim Kardashian, on the other hand, saw the jar as a way to measure patience, to prove that she could adapt and meet her sister halfway. Yet, beneath the surface, neither of them was entirely sure it would work. The documentary lens lingered on the jar itself, a simple glass container, transparent, unassuming, yet holding inside it every ounce of frustration that couldn't be said aloud. In those moments, it was almost as if the jar was alive, breathing, waiting, reminding them both that peace came at a cost. But the experiment wasn't without flaws. What happened when the jar filled too quickly? What happened when the slips of negativity became too numerous to ignore? One evening, Kim found herself laughing at the absurdity as she crumpled up yet another note. "If this keeps up," she said, "we're going to need a bigger jar." The laughter broke the tension, but it also revealed the fragility of the peace they were trying to create. The negativity jar became a metaphor for their dynamic. Every sibling rivalry, every passive-aggressive jab, every sarcastic comment, they were all stored away, piling up like years of history that had never truly been resolved. Yet, something unusual began to happen. As the days went on, both Kourtney and Kim became more mindful of their words. Instead of lashing out, they hesitated. Instead of dismissing each other, they paused. The jar was no longer just a punishment. It was a checkpoint, a reminder that peace required effort. In one particularly dramatic moment, Kourtney picked up a slip she had just written, holding it in her hand before dropping it in "This isn't just about you," she told Kim. "It's about me trying to protect my own peace." The words hung in the air, and for once, Kim didn't argue. She nodded, quietly, as though acknowledging the truth she had long resisted. That silence was powerful, more powerful than any shouting match they had ever had. What's remarkable about this experiment is that it wasn't orchestrated for the cameras. Yes, the world would eventually see it. But in that room, it was about two sisters trying to preserve something bigger than themselves. Fame, fortune, fashion, none of it mattered if they couldn't stand in the same room without conflict. The negativity jar, absurd as it might appear, became their bridge back to each other. Over time, the jar's symbolism deepened. For Kourtney Kardashian, it was about reclaiming her autonomy, reminding herself that peace was a choice she could enforce. For Kim Kardashian, it became about humility, about learning to step back from control and recognize that harmony sometimes required silence. The jar was never just glass, and paper it was a ritual, one that forced them to see their reflection in each other's words. Dramatic tension continued to build as the jar filled. At one point, they considered burning the slips, turning the negativity into ash as a final release. That act, though symbolic, represented something profound. The idea that conflicts could be transformed, not just contained. And when they finally did light the slips, standing together in a quiet backyard, watching the smoke rise into the night sky, it felt like a moment of fragile unity. Two sisters, two very different women, finding a way to rise above the weight of their history. As the narrator, standing in that space, one could not ignore the irony. The world has seen the Kardashians fight, cry, laugh, and build empires. But rarely has the world seen them attempt something so vulnerable, so human. The negativity jar may not erase years of tension, but it revealed something vital, that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the willingness to face it with grace. What began as a simple experiment transformed into a kind of therapy, an unspoken agreement that their bond mattered more than their grudges. And though the jar itself was small, its impact was immense. Kourtney Kardashian and Kim Kardashian had created a ritual of accountability, a tangible reminder that even in a family as public and complicated as theirs, peace was still possible. The drama of the Kardashian family has always been larger than life, but in this moment, it was distilled into something intimate and deeply relatable. Everyone, no matter how famous, struggles with family tension. Everyone, at some point, longs for peace. And sometimes, peace can begin with something as simple as a jar. As the days turned to weeks, the negativity jar became less about punishment and more about growth. The slips decreased. The jar remained half empty instead of overflowing. The sisters began to laugh more, to speak with a softness that hadn't been heard in years. For once, the cameras weren't capturing a feud. They were capturing a fragile truce on the end. Whether the negativity jar was a permanent solution didn't matter. What mattered was that Kourtney and Kim Kardashian tried. They took a risk. They faced each other honestly, and in doing so, reminded the world that even the most dramatic of families can choose peace. The question lingers, if a negativity jar can help Kourtney Kardashian and Kim Kardashian find a way to coexist, what might it do for the rest of us?